Indeed.
Wow.
Yeah, everyone is back. Awesome. Okay, let me stop sharing these so we have everyone. Lovely. So hopefully it was enough time, to at least, start the discussion. We went a bit over time with Raina, but I think that was probably a good thing. So rule number 1, we had Ellen, Nicole, Theo, Ram. Did you manage to identify someone to kind of collate initial thoughts to represent rule number 1? Any volunteers?
Yeah, I think I volunteered myself.
Thanks, Ram.
But it was a fantastic conversation, actually, and we were very fortunate. Sorry to the second group, we were very fortunate to have Dr. Kraft with us. So I think the group took the opportunity to ask some really nice questions. It was a very good conversation. I'll try my best to summarize it, but please, everybody else, feel free to jump in as you see fit. I think one of the first things we discussed was, I think, Phil, you brought up the point around number 3 in the list around challenging your thoughts and confirming, trying to challenge yourself to ask if you really know all of the information and whether it's actually true in its fullness. And so the notes I've taken here from Dr. Raina's response was he believed it's mainly about presence. So that was his explanation to us. So if we are truly present in the moment, in the conversation, in the event that we are involved in, we will be able to capture as much of the data that's available for us to be informing our decisions on the basis of, and making data as the foundation for our decisions. I think that was the phrase he used. And then we need to apply intuition on top of that to validate what we have heard, what we have learned, and whether we know enough to be able to make decisions. We'll never know everything. There's always going to be ambiguity. However, having presence to capture the information at hand and then applying intuition as a practice on a regular basis, I think, is what he means as the crux of that point number 3 around challenging your thoughts. Before I move to the next one, Phil, any add-on to that?
No, I think that pretty much captured it. I actually didn't think it quite answered what I meant, but it was good to kind of hear and get his perspective of the question. I think I was more interested in trying to understand about the truth element, just because at the end of the day, all our truths are different. So your absolute is going to be totally different. Well, hopefully not totally different, but a little bit different to my absolute. So I think that's the thing I was after. But yeah, it was great to sort of hear from him and the ideas.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Phil. And I think, Alan, you brought up number 11 around expectations. Don't have many expectations or any expectations and accept anything or something to that effect, I think is that point. And that was a curious one, because we all have expectations every day, both in work and in personal life. And oftentimes expectations don't get met, and we deal with it differently, depending on how we react to circumstances. And that was what Dr. Kraft explained as well, in terms of, it's not about not having goals or objectives to reach or to plan for, but it's about not having fixed expectations on exactly what the outcome will be or will need to look like. And therefore that allows us then some flexibility in our mindset to accept what reality ends up giving us as the outcome, in spite of our best efforts, and then working out what lessons can be learned out of that, and what we might be able to do to improve from that point forward, rather than get caught in a negative spiral about how we got there, and feel negative and upset about the fact that the expectation we originally had did not eventuate in exactly that form. I think that was sort of the summary. And he did speak again about suffering, expectations leading to suffering in his term. And that's, I think, what I was trying to explain there, as far as I understood what he said, around having too much fixation on specific expectations of different outcomes means when it doesn't happen, as inevitably more often than not it won't, then you tend to put yourself through a lot of suffering about why you didn't get there, and I don't know whether you berate yourself or other people around you, and how your behaviors then go into negativity. I think that's what he was referring to. Alan, any bills?
No, I think it was, as I say, it's really about you know, the negative impacts of having fixed expectations, and then that becomes something that sort of beats you up. I think the other sort of angle, just thinking about sort of the mindfulness, is that if you have expectations of individuals, they can then just become sort of hygiene factors, versus if you have lower expectations or no expectations, then actually you're more likely to express sort of a gratitude and a positivity, and also sort of a flexibility. So yeah, it was sort of really interesting one, but it's a very good summary.
Yeah, thank you. That reminded me, he did say, he did give us an example about saying, I mean, people actually turning up to work in the morning. That's a good thing, and you should be feeling positive about that. Like, so it's as opposed to, that's what you're getting paid for. I expect you to turn up. And the last point I think we got to discuss, and I think Dr. Kraft had to leave by this point. Nicole, you brought up the fact or the concept of actually authenticity, being each of us being authentic, actually leading to mindfulness, or actually being fully connected to being mindful and being a mindful leader. And as a leader, authenticity is key. And I think you spoke to us about, also you were sharing about some particular challenges you're facing at the moment in your workplace as well, in that regard with someone you're working with. So definitely that resonated with the group. Do you want to add anything to that, Nicole?
I think that was a really good summary. Thank you.
Awesome. So that was us, Nat.
Brilliant. Very well articulated as usual. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful. And rule number 2, we had Ben, Darren, Rob. I think David dropped. So who would like to step up and give a little bit of an idea of what came up in rule number 2? Don't speak all at once. Ben, you are mute. I'm assuming that's...
Look, why not? I wasn't the one who was supposed to speak, but we'll do it anyway. Yeah, look, we had a few good discussions around some of the points. The one that we spoke of a bit was around number 6, not getting too attached to the outcome, and also as well as a few others. The conversation we had was around look, a lot of us are in outcome focused roles, and if we didn't talk this quite exact analogy, but let's take the analogy of a hamburger stall. If a hamburger shop isn't selling hamburgers and isn't creating the outcome of selling hamburgers, then it's not going to be in business for very long. So we'd be having some pretty real conversations with people paying the bills very quickly if we weren't somewhat outcome focused. But I suspect that this is probably at the micro level, not at the macro level. And in which case, if we're talking at the micro level, then yeah, we agreed that you need to be a little bit flexible sometimes and go with the flow. Also, positivity came up as a thing that is something we all should get behind, and being able to listen and to not get too attached to your expectation, except that other people operate in a slightly different manner than you do. So no one wants from my group wants to add anything else?
Thanks, Ben. Thanks.
No,
The very first time, and you've been the spokesperson already. Appreciate it. Rob, David, Darren, any 2 cents to add? Rule number 1,
I think
2? Yep.
All sorted. Absolutely.
No, I think Ben did very well. We also had a good discussion. Where is it? What point was it? We had discussion. Well, anyway, I can't see it. But no, it was a good room, good discussion, good chat.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. All right. So let's see how we're tracking with time. We do have a little bit of time still. So yeah, it would be nice to go around and ideally, hopefully, not ideally, hopefully you got something specifically today, some insight, ideally something actionable perhaps, or maybe just really an observation, something that stayed with you. So your time was well spent. So I'll go around. Maybe I'll ask someone to volunteer if there is something that you are really clear that you're taking away with you today, and then we'll go around the screen before we close. So anyone would like to kick off? One takeaway, one learning, one mate. Rob, go for it.
Not something we talked about in our room, but something that was mentioned was the point around making sure your body was okay. I find it, really good, and it's hard, obviously, with the twins and being at home. But if I do go to work, I like to go for a lunchtime run or walk, just to make sure that I, keep the body sane, and that helps with my mind as well. So, not something that we discussed in our room, but something I think was good.
Super. Thanks, Rob. Next on my screen is Ben.
Yeah, sure. One of the things that resonated with me was something that our speaker said, was along the lines of why you've got this visions and missions in businesses. The two businesses, Amazon and the business he was working in, were very, very similar, but he saw issues with one failing, and it was around mindfulness. And that's something that really resonates with me. We grow, our business grows through acquisition, and we're always trying to absorb new cultures and bring parts of them in the good bits that make them special into us, and really push that out to the rest of the business. And sometimes it goes really well, and sometimes it doesn't. And it's a really hard thing to understand why it doesn't work sometimes, and why sometimes it works so well. But that really resonated with me, going, okay, yeah, perhaps focusing on some of the details around that, some of those intricate parts of just one-on-one interactions. Maybe if we look at that, we can get a better outcome.
Excellent. Thanks, Ben. Nicole.
This has been a fantastic exercise for me. It reminds me of some work I did about a year ago. And one of the topics in that particular course was to always position yourself as part of the problem statement. So when you are actually looking at the problem statement, make sure you included your own behavior, your own thinking. And I think everything in that list of 12 really does reflect that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nicole. Yeah, taking responsibility, right, and ownership to our contribution to whatever's happening out there. Thank you. Yes. Phil.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the body topic as well. I hadn't really thought about that deeply, the connection of body before mind. So I think that's something to probably reflect on a bit more.
Good stuff. Thanks, Phil, for sharing. Darren.
I'm going to let you double down on Rob and Phil and just, personal reflections go. The separation between mind and body can't be done. How you physically feel and how you mentally think are not separable. But we sort of believe that we can separate our thinking from our feeling. So I think that's something that a lot of people could better reflect upon, is like, the connection between their physical health and their mental health.
Absolutely. Thanks, Darren. David.
Hopefully this works. So I guess the one thing that's really struck with me is that something we were talking about in our room, that every discussion that we have as senior leaders actually has an impact. Now, it's about managing your expectation around what that impact is, but everything we say, does have an impact in some way. So, we need to be mindful of, we need to think about our expectations of what that impact is, because it may not be exactly the impact we're expecting.
Brilliant. Great insight as well, David. Thank you. Alan.
Yeah, I think the thing for me is, from sort of previous conversations and coaching, the use of the word should can create sort of negative thought patterns, and it can end up it's something that sort of you can beat yourself up with. And I'm just coming back to that expectations one, in that expectations can play, if not appropriately positioned or thought about can play a similar role, in that they create something that you can beat yourself up or you can beat your team up about unintentionally, versus actually being much more sort of open and aspirational, and thinking about sort of goals and moving forward rather than, say, the hard and fast stick of what expectations can be.
Wow, deep insight, Alan. Thank you. Indeed. Ram.
I think number 4 for me sort of stands out, and I'll explain why. Because I've been thinking through this whole session about what would it take, what's the most important thing for me to be able to have at least some level of success in truly implementing most of these principles. And I've realized that I can only truly do that if I'm able to distance myself from the here and now and the heat of the moment, and be able to see the wood for the trees, so to speak, so that I can actually see the bigger picture, and I can make those adjustments on the fly. And that's sort of led me to hone in on number 4. Don't judge, just observe. Until you've collected the information you need and applied intuition. And I think by being able to do that, I think I would have a better chance of trying to implement several of the other principles.
Nice, thanks, Ram. And I love that he touched on intuition, isn't it? Because being such a data-driven person or scientist, but bringing intuition to the equation for decision making, that can be so often neglected, Thank you.
So left and right brain.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. Do you have any thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think I always have something to share, of course. I think in terms of especially the 12 principles, number 1, I know I'm not always the most present with things. That's partly the situations I find myself in sometimes. For example, here I often find myself wandering off to go, I've got to get this bit ready for the next part of the meetup and that sort of thing. So I should try and be a little bit more present and mindful on some of those bits. But I guess for me, the key sort of takeaway of it is looking at the balance between principle 2 and principle 12, of allowing people to make mistakes, but at the same time helping them and teaching them. And a big part of, I guess, what I find in my work is I try to help others avoid the mistakes and not have to make them. If they can learn from my mistakes, that's even better. But maybe sometimes I do just have to let them go and experience how hard it is when you do make some of those mistakes, or have something ready to have a safety net ready, so when they make it, the landing isn't quite as hard as it was for me when I didn't have a safety net.
Lovely. Yeah. Thanks, Michael. That's, I think, a reflection of you being such a caring and supportive leader, right? Wonderful.
What was your takeaway then?
Well, I was going to say next. So I think my takeaway, many things, but one thing that I really loved is how he closed saying that, and maybe it's the coaching me, the baby steps, the small changes, the doing the right thing every day, that in the long run can make a huge difference. So just think about every day, end of the day review, what have you done, to contribute to that shift, and it can be just baby steps. It doesn't need to be huge, in small steps every day can really help us to move in the right direction. I think that was the probably the key thing for me that stayed. Yeah. All right, so on the dot, 8:30, look at us. Perfect time management, Michael, and everyone, high five. Thanks for being concise, short and sweet. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you got value from this conversation. Really appreciate it. Help us to spread the word. If you can make it next roundtable or sometime soon, it'll be lovely. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and yeah, all the best. See you around. Thank you.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Thanks.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.